Hello, GenRight Nation. I'm Tony Pellegrino, and this is Tech Talk. Thanks for joining us. It is March 19th, 2025, and you can see we've made a couple of changes, new graphics, new shirt, and on YouTube only now. So hopefully everybody can adopt from the other platform over to here. We certainly like everybody joining us live because that's part of the fun with interacting with you and answering all kinds of questions from you guys. If you do have a question, please just type it in as a comment and include as much information as you can, and we will try and get to all the questions. Today's show is actually an open question answer session. So by all means, no question is stupid. I want to hear them all, and I will try and add what I can to whatever the topic is. So reminder to subscribe to our YouTube channel, the GenRight YouTube channel. That way you'll get the notifications when we do go live so that you won't ever miss one. And if for some reason you miss it and you have to come back and watch it, go ahead and click the live tab, and that'll show you all the different Tech Talks. This is our 5th year of doing Tech Talk, so there's lots of Tech Talks and lots of topics that we've covered over the years. I'm sure you'll be able to find something that applies to you. But of course, this is your opportunity to ask a question live. Now, on YouTube, I do want to mention, if you would like to make a comment, you do need to create a profile. Otherwise, you can watch this without logging in or having a profile. You can just, be an innocent bystander, so to speak, and watch anonymously. But if you want to comment or ask a question, then you've got to create a profile and log in. All right, Jen. Can you tell us a few people who we've got watching today?
Matt McDonough says, no stupid questions. Tony, what do you think about ORIs?
Well, those things were designed for buggies, and there's really no place for them on a Jeep. Jeeps are way too heavy, which would require much too much pressure to operate them. And when you put that much pressure in, the seals are clamping on the shaft, so then they don't want to move smoothly. And those also are very affected by temperature. So, if you're running in a hot environment, they will tend to start rising up, changing your ride height that you originally set it at. So I don't recommend them. Stick with something that doesn't depend on the seals holding your vehicle at ride height, which is a coilover or something with a spring, and you're going to be much happier at the end of the day.
Okay,
right.
The Owl's Nest Garage says hello, everyone. Chris
Nice.
Carey says, hey, GenRight Nation. The Harrington Group says hello, GenRight team from sunny Florida.
Nice.
Shaka JKU, hello from Michigan. Bobby Cleveland, hello, GenRight Nation. Bobby Cleveland here probably shows me as my shop. Michael Costin, hello, GenRight Nation from Alabama tonight.
Nice.
John Koprova says hello from Denver. Sean Flaherty says howdy, GenRight Nation from Simpsonville, Kentucky. Stinky McStinkerton says hello from Escondido.
Nice.
Shamrock Adventure says hey, Tony and GenRight Nation.
Nice.
Keith Nieces says it's that time.
It
JC
is.
Cologne says hello, family, and goodbye, Facebook. Heath Basham says hello from Texas. Richard Peterson says hello again. Kathy McCavis says howdy, GenRight Nation. Justin Moore says howdy from Tucson. Randy Hemme, hello from Louisiana.
Wow, great group of people.
Yeah,
we appreciate
lots of people.
everybody
More
watching.
jumping on.
It really means a lot to us, and I'm glad you all find this informative. So start typing in those questions because this is an open question answer session. I'll give you guys a few more seconds to get online and gather your thoughts and start typing those in. I do have what we call a feature product. And that is, for those of you that have stretched your Jeep, say with our TJ to LJ kit, we now offer a 24-inch section of our rocker guards that you guys can cut in half and stretch, kind of add on to whatever rocker guard you have there without having to buy brand new expensive rocker guards. Those, we just photographed them today. They'll be up on the website tomorrow. So look for those, and I think that you will like that. They're inexpensive and easy to, if you've done a stretch on your Jeep, adding on a section of rocker guard is going to be nothing for you. Again, open questions and answer session, so fire away.
Stinky McStinkerton asked, now that it's been a while, how is the Elite Stage 1 doing on the 8100s?
It's actually doing really good. I haven't got to do all the testing I want, but I have played with them a little bit. Initially, whatever they came with as the factory setting, I thought was a little bit stiff. And we've changed a couple of things right now, and it's getting toward where I want it. What I need to do now is get it out in the desert and really start ripping. And I'll have an opportunity to do that here in a couple of weeks, not this coming weekend, but maybe the next one. And I can report back for sure. We're going to be shooting some videos and stuff of that too, because we want to show people, look at the performance. This is going to be pretty darn cool. I'm also putting one of those stage 1 kits on Jennings JK that we just put one of our brand new V2 cages in. So she'll be out there ripping around on that, and I'm sure she'll have plenty to say about it herself. So
the Owl's Nest Garage says, hey Tony, last segment I asked about tire size on my Jeep. You mentioned a weakness in the ARB diff. What is a stronger locking diff? Prefer a selectable locker. The Owl.
Yeah, that's a tough one. What happens is there's only so much room in the carrier, like the way they machined the bearing carrier. Now, if you go with a much more expensive, like a High 9 or one of the Race 10-inch carriers, they put a bigger bearing in there. And not that ARB they put a bigger bearing surface in there, but not that ARB or any one of the other companies has made a bigger carrier, if that makes sense. I might even have a carrier here that I can pull out and show you what I'm talking about. But the bearing size is what dictates how thick that wall is on there. And, we've all just been going bigger and bigger, spline counts on the shafts. And the manufacturers have had a hard time keeping up with that. Remember, the Ford 9-inch was developed a long time ago for a 30 spline axle. And they never imagined 35 and 40 splines. So, that's it. We've kind of surpassed what they originally intended, if that makes sense.
Bobby Cleveland says, just got a new Eaton Dana 60 locker to go in my Curry 60 high pinion. Curry says I have to shave the locker down to fit the case. Any insights on where it needs to be shaved?
Typically, it's not the locker that needs to be shaved. It's usually the ring gear. But if it is, in fact, the locker, the shape of the case, of the casting, right? You're going to need to fit that in there. And then just look at the edge. It's probably one of the square edges. Let me see if I've got a locker right here. And I can pull one out and speak to this. I don't see one there. Let me check the other side. I usually keep one or two of these around. And of course, I got nothing. Anyways, the case is very square on the locker. And you're probably just going to have to shave off the corners would I imagine would be all it would be. Because there's really nowhere else you can take material off. So, yeah, just fit it, check it, make sure nothing's rubbing. Because it'll add a bunch of shavings to your gear oil, and you don't want that, of course.
Keith Nieses says, Tony, What are your thoughts on the bead grip technology versus bead lock for a daily driver and a weekend wheeler?
Okay. So, bead locks obviously were designed for, the serious off-road or even competition, back in the original days. But I can tell you this, if you buy a manufactured bead lock, and I guess let me back up. Back in the old days, you'd have to send or a set of your wheels to this company called OMF out here in California. That guy would then machine off the outside lip on your wheel and weld on, converting it to a bead lock. Those were competition or serious off-roaders because you were converting a wheel that was DOT approved. Nowadays, companies like Raceline produce a manufactured beadlock wheel, and I got to be honest, they're actually very good. I'm running them on aftershock, and we drive that. That's my daily driver, and we drive it 10, 12 hours to get to wherever we're going. And I've driven that for thousands and thousands of miles and not even had a bolt loosen up. So I wouldn't be afraid to run a beadlock. You do have the initial, it has to be tightened properly, mounted properly, tightened properly, and then rechecked. But once you kind of recheck it and everything's good, it's really unlikely that it'll loosen up on you. That said, some people are just more comfortable with this style wheel, which is, I think what you're referring to, which is that bead look type wheel. So you mount it just like a regular wheel, and it has the nice look of a bead lock, and even some protection, additional, because if you take a regular wheel like this, if you start grinding off that edge, rubbing it on stuff on the trail, pretty soon, your wheel doesn't have the lip that it did, where at least this has a bunch more material there that'll give you some longer life. So I hope that answers your question.
Alan Knight says, shout out to Andrew for taking awesome care of me getting the Elite system and Curry axles.
Nice. That's good to hear. I was just going to tell you, Andrew, Arnold, Jordan, Jeff, Jamie, we were all in here just prior to the show filming a new video that we're going to show you guys, where we chose our top spare parts that we would bring with us on the trail. So kind of a teaser. I want to let you guys know to keep an eye out for that. It'll be posted on YouTube. I don't know if that'll end up being this Friday or next Friday, but it was super fun filming it, and I think you guys will find it very informative.
The Harrington Group says, have you seen a CTIS for the Jeeps that work on the fly? Seen a couple that make you buy rims, etc. recently.
The air up system on the fly. Dynatrac developed one for their axles. I don't know if it ever went into production, but in my travels, I've never seen one in use, out there on the trail with me, or, that I've observed even at a big event like, Easter Jeep Safari or the Hammers. So.
Mark Lawrence says, okay, what's the story behind the armadillo on the counter?
So, in my travels across the country, you see a lot of these poor things must be, attracted to the headlights because they're squashed all over the I-40. And I was trying to find one that was relatively intact, that I could maybe have stuffed or, do some fun stuff with. I think Jamie found this one for me, but this is the original body armor. So that's we keep that around as a reminder of, it's been invented way before us.
Shamrock Adventures says, it's 4 years today that Laura and I picked up our Shamrock Tracer from GenRight in Simi Valley. Aww.
Is it really? Wow.
Happy birthday
Time
to
flies.
Shamrock.
Time flies. That's
Rick
great.
Turner says, love the rocker guard extension. I planned on making one of myself, but this is way better.
Yeah, I don't know if Ginger's watching, but her build motivated me to get that finished because she needs them on hers. Yep.
Off-Road George says, are the GenRight LJ seat mounts lower than factory seat mounts?
They are lower and they're adjustable. I don't know if do we want to swing over here and look at it?
Sure.
Let's see here what we've got. Come on, computer. We sell a lot of different seat mounts, but this particular person is asking about our TJ-LJ seat mounts. So hopefully I can find them. There they are. This comes as a kit, and obviously, you've got to build it. That's part of what keeps the price down. And this is, let me see if I can get you there you go. That's what they look like when they're put together. But it is fully adjustable. You get 3 positions, front and rear. And look at me for a second. What it allows you to do is actually adjust not only the height, but the tilt of the seat. Some people are particularly sensitive to how much pressure is on the back of their upper leg, so you can change that tilt. Or, if you add tilt to it, it keeps you from sliding out of the seat. So it's a really cool setup. It is made to reattach like 5-point harnesses. All those features are built into it. But yes, it does give you that ability to raise and lower it. So pretty cool.
George Files asks, can you give a high-level overview of how you remove the OEM CAN bus?
Well, the high level is the first thing we did was we took out the dash and threw it away. Then any wire that was left in the vehicle, we stripped it all out and we started completely over. So by doing that, we're completely removing even the connections that went to the battery. Everything was gone. So as part of a build that I want to do, I want to move weight from the engine compartment back. So I moved the battery and I added a battery, back and under the seat, in the rear seat, by the way. There's plenty of room back there. Then, we put an LS engine in, but it could be anything, which came with its own standalone. I chose Holley EFI, and they have their own wire harness for that. And then I did a 4L80 full manual transmission, so that requires no computer whatsoever. And then we put in a Motec system, which is completely separate and independent of everything. And that controls all the fans, all the lights, every other accessory that you would want to control or monitor. That is done through the Motec. And it's a very hardened, when they talk about things for the military, they're like super beefy, and they use that term hardened. So they're made for serious abuse. They're waterproof. They're dustproof, and that is really the right way to go. Now, on top of that, when the wiring harness was built for something like Terremoto, it actually uses radiation-treated wires that are mil spec, and those wires have a finer strand, is the word I'm looking for, finer strand of copper in them, and they'll carry more current. So a smaller wire can actually do the job of a larger wire, and that also saves weight with, typically, I don't know if you've ever taken out a wire harness, but they're not light. So, everything we're doing is weight conscientious. I haven't said anything up to this point, but I am building a Terremoto 2.0. So that is coming. So you're going to want to keep an eye out for that. And I am paying particular attention to weight and design, and it is going to be really trick. So, all right.
Cool. Snowboard Life says, hey Tony, what kind of off-roading do you like? Muddy, rock crawler, or just go fast on the flats? I've never gone fast on my rig in the flats.
Well, you know, certainly to go fast, you need to have the right setup. But specifically to answer your question, I enjoy the variety, right? There's days that I love, you know, hopping in Terremoto and doing some crazy rock climbing or going super fast. And there's other days I like getting an aftershock, my JL. Still coilovers, still very capable 40-inch tires, right? But you know, whether I'm going overlanding or just driving it around, I really enjoy the simplicity of a Jeep, the kind of the utilitarian factor, that you can take the top off or put the half doors on and just enjoy the open air. I'm not really a closed up kind of a vehicle guy. So, yeah, that's a great question, but I really enjoy it all. So, yeah, hard for me to answer for sure.
Okay, Daniel Partita says, question, how much shock shaft is best showing up travel at ride height? 3 inches?
So normally I would answer 3 inches. A lot of it depends on your setup. And I don't, do you have any idea what vehicle this is? And is it our suspension? Okay. So maybe the guy can add a little bit, but typically it is 3 inches. And what happens is if we're talking about a coilover, when you start to go in a coilover in a GenRight suspension with coilovers, is we have built-in anti-squat. So what happens is they start to open. So that 3 inches turns into 5 or 6 inches as you're going, and it stays like that. So it's one of the beauties of our suspension design is that you can have this thing that sits squatted and nice, but then when you take off, it opens up and it's soaking up everything you throw at it. And by the way, the more power you have, the more it can open up. And, you know, it's really quite awesome. That's why I'm always encouraging people to go for a ride with us, because it's absolutely mind-boggling.
Trail Team 7, Jennings, did you get your cage back from powder coat?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We were making some changes on it. So, and I got busy on a couple other things, because I'm not only working on her Jeep, I'm working on my Jeep, which is in the studio here right behind us. For those of you that I was talking about changing the oil in it the other day, well, somebody mentioned the Baxter unit that I had bought. Well, I actually motivated today and installed that as part of my oil change. So I'll be able to talk about that as well. So.
Let's see. Stephen Draper says, I can't stand how the rear shock mounts are on the underneath of the axle on my JL.
Yeah, me neither.
I love how GenRight mounts them out of the way on top of the axle. What
Yes.
are options to move them or protect them?
Okay, so great question, and here's the simple answer. There is no magic in what it takes, okay? The shock is a certain length. So right now the factory has it so that it stays underneath the body, okay? But it hangs low. So if you want to move that, then it's got to go up into the body, which is why all of our shock towers cut into the inner fender well. Now, we've done a fantastic job of leaving you as much space as we can in the cargo area, and your seats still, you know, operate just fine, the rear seats. So now that is if we're talking about a JL. I think the guy said JL. So JL, JK, that's what happens. In a CJ, YJ, TJ, the shocks can be moved up and they stay in the inner fender well. So we really got spoiled with those. And then when they came out with these newer vehicles, they changed it up on us, and we had to improvise, which meant cutting into the inner fender well a little bit. Not the end of the world. I have it on both Aftershock and Terremoto. Works great, love it. And you can go up to a 3-inch diameter coilover, which is huge. So, all right.
Bob Becker says, spare parts? Jeeps don't break.
Yeah. So, there are certain spare parts that are typically unique to your vehicle. By the way, not only the spare part, but the tool that's associated with changing that spare part. One of my favorite examples that I'll share with you guys is the serpentine belt. Maybe, Jen, can you throw me that one that's right there? And this is a, good catch. This is a great example, right? So, you can look up what the factory says you should have. You get the part number, but just because they say this is what the Jeep should have, you should not trust this. What I recommend is the moment you buy this, you take off the one that's on there, you put the brand new one on the Jeep, your old one gets put back in this container if it's the proper one, and this is your spare. She just pulled this out of my spares. And that's the way you know if that one shreds or falls off or something happens, this one will fit perfectly. The other thing that I'll tell everybody, if you've got a JK or a JL with the 3.6 engine, is the idler pulleys commonly burn up. I don't know if they used a cheap bearing or whatever they did. There's 2 of them. You need to replace those or carry spares. I recommend just replacing them. Remember, rubber and things that spin like a bearing or an alternator are good for 5 years. Okay, so, just put it on your list and be ready to change that stuff, okay?
Rick Harrington says that Dynatrac did build one in production if you buy their new axles and rims to go with it.
Oh, that's right. You do have to get the wheels too, because there's an O-ring on the hub that comes through the brake caliper or brake rotor that, that whole thing has to seal up, but it takes a special wheel. It's cool. I don't know that I would use it, but it is a cool thing. So, by the way, I have an air system on Aftershock that within a minute I can re-air all 4 tires at the same time. So it's fast.
Keith Nieses says, Tony, the bead grip technology is from Mathed Wheels.
Ah, okay. So that might be their particular patent, and they probably have some gripper on the inside to keep the tire from just popping off, or it's an extra lip on the inside. But I can tell you, like if I flip this wheel here, almost all modern day wheels have this, and by the way, it makes it a real bear to mount them, and it's this lip right here. So can you zoom in on that? So what happens is when they push the tire on, it comes over this and then sits in this little groove. So some companies raise this groove, which makes it very difficult to get the tire on and off. But, it's also not going to fall off on you either. So, that's a good point.
Josh Nessler says, is it true you are taking the budget TJ to Sand Hollow?
Oh, no, the budget TJ is a long way from getting worked on. So I know I had too many projects. Guys, Jennings and I are reading this book about you can't say no. It's about this guy who was wildly successful because he could never say no. And that's me. I just can't say no to these things. I enjoy doing it all and talking about it with you guys. So yeah, part of the fun.
Off-Road George asked, why don't Jeepers run tire balls for flat protection?
So tire balls add about 14 pounds per tire. So you're adding unsprung weight. They make it difficult to change tire pressure. So in a race application, you run a really high tire pressure so that you don't get a pinch flat. And the tire balls on the inside are, typically aired up to, 15 or 20 pounds, so that if you do flat the tire, then you're riding on the balls. Those balls, when you do ride on them, create a lot of heat. There's a ton of lubrication inside there to keep that from, completely exploding. And they are very complicated to mount because you gotta like get the tire halfway on and slip all these balls in. And then there's this complicated needle manifold that airs them all up to the same pressure. And I know I ran them for several years in my race car, and my team guys absolutely hated those things. But the military uses them. They serve a purpose for sure. It keeps you off the rim, and it is a good, well-made product, I should say.
Alan Knight asked, with Raceline wheels, do you need to use the spacer kit they sell with the Mickey Thompson tires?
I did not have to. And if you're not familiar with what this gentleman's talking about, it's when you go to put the beadlock ring on, they have, if your tire has a really thick bead, that's the part that mounts to the rim, and there's steel inside of it, right? Some manufacturers make them really thick. When you go to tighten down the ring, the ring just keeps squishing, and that's a little bit dangerous. So they make this little spacer that goes in there so that everything can tighten down and stay nice and square. So, because if the ring starts to bow too much, it's putting pressure on the bolt, and then as things flex, the bolts can break, and obviously that's not a good situation. Then the tire falls off. So, all right. Lots of good questions. I like it.
Let's see. Off-road overland camping asked, will your Jeep builds pass smog?
So it depends. So one of the reasons that I built Aftershock the way that I did was so that I kept the stock engine and transmission, right? That was very important, so that if, down the road I sold this to somebody, that they would be able to pass smog no problem. That is an important consideration. We always retain all the evap system. Even when we switch over to our tank is considered a direct factory replacement. We reuse the fuel pump, we reuse all the lines that reconnect it to the entire evap system, and all of that. Guys, today's vehicles have so many systems that actually monitor whether your gas cap's even tight. If you try and override any of that stuff, the thing's just going to freak out. So, we make sure that that's the way it's done. Now, if you put a V8 conversion in, that's there's no way to get that through in California anymore. And that, you're going to have to do something out of state, or it just becomes an off-road only vehicle. Yep.
Daniel Partita, who asked about the shock shafts, how much should be showing. He has a 2017 Jeep JKU Dana 44s 2.0 King coilovers.
Okay. Yeah, so then that would apply to him. Now, on a coilover, let me grab my prop here. I can do this without tipping over a bunch of stuff. Okay. On a coilover, you have what's called secondary nuts. Now, this coilover is obviously fully extended because there's no weight on it. But if you compressed this to the point where he's talking about where there's 3 inches of shock shaft showing, this slider is going to be very close to these two. Some people call them crossover nuts. I call them secondary nuts. But what happens is it's the point at which the two springs, or what people refer to as the dual rate, crosses over into a single rate spring, where the lower spring is the heavier spring, so you kick in a different spring rate. The reason I'm mentioning all this, and it's super important, is that you want to make sure that this only travels a little bit before it touches these. Typically it's about the width of your finger, so that you can start progressively ramping the spring rate so that you're 3 inches of shock shaft showing doesn't just slam through, which would be getting into your bump stops then. All of this is part of the setup, right? And we've done different Tech Talk videos on this and different videos over on the GenRight YouTube channel in quite a bit of detail talking about all this. Or when you come to an event, sometimes I'll adjust people's shocks and they always come right back and go, oh my God, like that made the huge difference. They can't even believe it. Again, it's the reason I tell you, if you're at an event and you get a chance to take a ride in one of our vehicles, we have this dialed. And you can ride in anybody else's vehicle you want, including your own, and it will not feel like ours. It's like we have this figured out. So if you buy everything from us, you're getting our valving, our spring rates, our help, right? Like it's all part of that. And you can have a vehicle. Now, here's the deal. You know, if you live in Missouri and you trailer your Jeep to the park and, you know, you can only go 15 miles an hour on the trails, is it that important? Well, you know where it's important? When you're trying to bounce up an obstacle or you drop off something, you don't just blow through the travel. And this is why I traveled the country for several years to come wheel in everybody's backyard and show you it does make a difference. When you can have the dampening control, it makes a huge difference in your ability, combined with throttle control, to get up obstacles. Whether it's in the mud, the snow, the rain, whatever, it makes a huge difference. So anyways, what else you got?
Snowboard Life asked me, what kind of rig do you drive and what do you like to wheel? I drive a Jeep JKU
2014, yeah.
Sonic, he's the love of my life, except for Tony. And I like to wheel everything. Rock crawling, overlanding, everything except I'm not really a big fan of sand dunes. It's not my favorite.
That's right. You did say that. I love sand dunes.
Yeah, not my favorite.
And she loves riding in my Jeep in the sand dunes. Her and Winston.
Don't love mud.
No, mud's just a lot of cleanup.
After. Yeah. After.
Yeah.
Let's see. Michael Costin. You need to talk with big truck manufacturers about their front suspensions because they beat the crap out of us.
They do. I have a Ram 3500 and that's a stiff ride, you know, but throw 5,000 pounds in it and it rides like a Cadillac, you know. It's what it's made for, right?
Rick Turner asked, are the new Tech Talk shirts on the site for sale?
I have not put them on the site for sale, but if people would like that, I could, for sure. Would you want a polo shirt like this or like a t-shirt? If anybody on there watching could answer, then I happen to really like this navy blue. I printed them in like a heather gray, a dark gray, this color, and one other color, and this is by far my favorite.
Yeah, it looks good.
Oh,
Joe
black.
Alice says, LJ 7-inch stretch legend kit. How far back from the skid plate should the mounts be, or what is the proper triangle? How high should ride height be for the 40s? Okay.
Got a few different questions there. Okay, so on the frame, there's the straight section where the belly skid would mount. When that changes in direction, that's where the mounts go. Okay, and if you didn't get a copy of our legend instructions, you can certainly email me or one of the guys and they can email a set of those over to you, and it goes into great detail on exactly where to mount all that stuff. It is important that you get them put in the proper location and then build your links to the proper length. And I know we've talked about this before, but I'll mention it again. The amount of separation of the links, especially at the axle, is important. You'd ideally like 9 inches, but 8 inches will get you by. So that's from the center of the lower link to the center of the upper link. Those are important, and then those come forward and they get closer together. And by the way, you want those as far apart as you can get them too, but you can't go too far because the body's there. So the mounts that you bought from us give you the ability to separate it as far as you can under the body. All right, and then what was the second part of his question? Oh, how much on ride height, I think it was?
How high should ride height be for 40s?
Well, okay, so typically, and this is the easiest place to measure, from the top of the tire to like the inner fender well, typically I set that at like 7 to 8 inches. Because it's not that you have that much travel just straight up and down, it's articulation. You'll eat that up. That should put you at 3 inches of shock shaft showing, and that should put your belly at about 19 to 20 inches. Okay?
Chris Carey says replace the pulley on the tensioner too on the 3.6.
There you go. Yep. That's what I'm talking about. You just need to, that stuff just spins, and they're cheesy, cheap bearings, and all that stuff gets hot, and, so.
Matt McDonough asked, bead locks and balancing. Do you use weights or balancing beads?
That's a great question. When we have to, which right now, not a single one of my mounted 40s or 42s has taken any weight. The tires nowadays are so good that I don't have to put any weights on them. But if you have to, I don't do the balance beads, only because they typically crumble inside over time. And with us airing up and airing down, you're going to be losing some of that stuff in and out. So I typically do the stick-on weights, and I put duct tape over the top of them. Make sure the rim is super clean, stick them on, and put some Gorilla Tape over the top of them.
Grant Smith says, I've got my wife's 2005 LJ with a basic 4-inch lift on it. Axles are centered and correct link steering on it, but having to constantly put steering input in on the street. Thoughts?
Okay, so what's happened is, let's see, I'll use my pen on the back of this piece of paper. So from the factory, they put in 6 degrees of caster on your front axle, okay? When you lift the Jeep, the caster goes away, okay? So I'm sure you've pushed a shopping cart, right? Caster, those wheels can just like flutter all over when the caster's not right. So when you need a certain amount of caster to make the Jeep go straight, and then that doesn't require much steering input, right? Because the vehicle wants to track straight. So that's number one. Number two would be that there's some play somewhere in your suspension system, and that can be the track bar, the suspension joints, right? If like the factory has a vulcanized rubber that's in all the suspension joints, that's very quiet and it's very smooth. So it gives you the best possible ride. All right. Well, once we start to lift these Jeeps and put bigger tires on and stuff, those factors are compromised. And that's why we start going to heavier duty stuff like Johnny joints and a Heim on one end, so it's solid mounted, and then maybe a Johnny joint on the other, which has a much higher durometer than the rubber that was in there from the factory, or even from some of the aftermarket lift kits. All of those factors play a part in you having to chase that. Now, in addition to that, there's a couple of things. First off, a TJ is kind of an older vehicle. So the gearbox, the steering gearbox may have developed some play in it. And sometimes it's not necessarily in the gearbox, but that is adjustable through a small Allen head up on the top of the steering box. But it could also be in the shaft. There's little U-joints and stuff that go from the steering wheel all the way down to the steering box. Those could have play in them as well. All of this, I mention all this because the older the vehicle is, the more likely all of these things are stacking up on you, okay? Next, I don't know about the tire and wheel choice you made. A lot of the times when people put bigger tires on their vehicle, they get an offset wheel, okay? So now, not only did you reduce the amount of caster you have, you widened everything. So now you're asking everything to do more work, right? And it magnifies, if there's any play in anything, then those wider wheels now magnify that. In addition to that, your choice of tires. If you got a very square tire versus a round tire, the square tire to turn has to come up and out in order to, versus a round tire can kind of roll into the turns. These are all very careful considerations, and I don't know that we talk about this enough. So, you know, if you want to, you can email me some pictures of what your setup is, and I might be able to, you know, pictures worth 1,000 words, look at it and go, oh, you've got a problem here, here, and here. And then, you know, it's up to you to do something about it, or just say, well, it is what it is, and I'm going to leave it. So.
What's your email?
Tony@GenRight.com. Doesn't get any easier.
Rhett Williams asked, what air system do you use?
I use Rock or Road. It's on our website, and the compressor, it uses a dual compressor that mounts underneath the passenger seat, and then the unit itself is under the driver's seat. And one of the reasons I like it is that it's fully programmable. So what I can do is actually set, like, hey, when I say air up, I mean go to 30 PSI. And when I say air down, I mean go to 8. So you just hit it in an automatic mode and it'll drop or raise right to those settings. Now, you can do it in a manual mode and get anything you want in between, or I can air up my buddy's vehicle, or I can run an air tool or spray things off, you know, with an air blow fitting. But it is very fast. I'm running, I can't remember the model of the Vi-Air Dual that I'm running, but it cranks. And you do have to have the engine running because it's pulling so much power that it'll kill your battery. So.
Mike says, battery question.
Sure.
New JT, still under warranty. What do you guys do for an aftermarket setup? Aux Delete, Genesis dual battery kit? Thanks.
Okay, so that, by the way, that's a great question. Yes, Aux Delete. By the way, that's super easy. It's fuse or relay number 42. You throw that away. You got to take the battery out to get to the little battery underneath. Throw that away. You got to move one cable up and reconnect it. You can see there's plenty of videos on YouTube about you know, goofballs that have done it, but through all those videos, you'll see just what I just mentioned. I run a high-grade Odyssey battery. You can go right to the Odyssey battery website and look up by your model number which battery fits in there. And I got the super, I think they call it the Extreme Duty, which has a metal jacket on it. And a lot of those batteries have posts on top and posts on the side. So mounting your accessories is easier. You know, these newer vehicles, the JT, the JL, are very voltage sensitive. Any kind of spikes in the system can freak the thing out. So you definitely want good power. The only thing about the AGM batteries is you cannot kill them, okay? So for instance, now the newer vehicles turn off the headlights, you know, they do all this stuff by themselves. But if you had a situation where you left something on and you kill that battery, they never come back, okay? So unlike a lead acid battery, I like the sealed AGM, and I just don't let that happen. I'm smart enough to like make sure that that does not happen. Now, let's talk about the dual battery, the Genesis dual battery. I am not a fan of adding a single thing under the hood of your Jeep. Not a single thing. I don't even want to see a fuse block. There's nothing that you can put under that hood that is made for the heat that's generated from the engine, including the battery. That's why on Terramoto, the battery is moved out of the engine compartment. A battery, by the way, is maximum operating temperature. And you can see it right on their website. It says 170 or 180 degrees. Well, what do you think it is under the hood of your Jeep? It's like 240. Okay, so by the way, when you exceed that temperature rating, you're just deteriorating the life, and it's just the way it is. And I don't know. Anyways, what I did in my JL was I put a small, basically like the battery you're deleting under the hood, I put a small battery like that toward the back. I have a solar panel that charges that battery. It's also hooked into the main power system one way, so it only charges, and that battery runs my fridge. So that way the thing can run all the time, and I don't have to worry about it killing my main battery, which would prevent me from starting. Okay? I know that was a long explanation, I'm sorry, but that's not a simple thing.
Stinky McStinkerton says, the method bead grips my buddy has on his UTV sometimes make it hell to break the bead on both sides when changing tires.
That's right. That's because they put these lips are so big on the inside. So everything's a compromise, right? You never get something for nothing. And you've got to make those choices. One of the things I love about a bead lock is I can change that tire myself, right? That's a super easy thing for me to mount and dismount anywhere. I can do it, right in the desert. So those are things to consider. But maybe you're not as handy as I am. I don't know. That's something you got to decide whether you want to do that or not.
Wayne Kinchy says, dual battery relocation in a JKU with elite suspension, behind the rear seat or under?
Under the rear seat. So years ago, I don't even know how many years ago, 10, maybe even 15 years ago, I toured one of the NASCAR factories in North Carolina. Actually, I toured 4. But one of them, the crew chief told me, nothing, absolutely nothing goes above the driver's shoulders unless the rules specifically say, okay? And what that made me think about was how important, now those are already lowered street cars, right? And these guys are like super particular about it, about center of gravity, right? I looked at the oil sumps that they ran, and they were like less than the thickness of my hand from the asphalt. So they were very particular about keeping the center of gravity low. So I want to therefore impress upon you how important it is to keep the center of gravity low on your Jeep, okay? That's why I would never tell you to run anything on the roof, okay? That is an absolute no-no. By the way, if you haven't ever tried this, just drive your Jeep around the block, take the spare tire off, and drive it around the block again. You'd be amazed that anywhere from 100 to 200 pound tire will make a huge difference in just the way your Jeep handles. And that's like right about the height of your shoulders, okay? So batteries, I don't know if you ever lifted one up, they're dang heavy, okay? Now you're talking about 1 or 2 of those, you want them as low as you can get them. If I thought it would help, I'd tell you to cut a hole in the floor and French them down through there. But what happens is right below that, you've got the links coming up, so you can't really get them much lower. But yes, you want everything, every tool, water, fuel, all that stuff is dense and heavy. You want that as low in that vehicle as you can get. So when you look in my Jeep, you're going to find tools in the, foot compartment behind the driver's seat, as low as I can get them. Like all that is super important. Okay.
Bobby Cleveland says, ran last weekend with a buggy that had water in the front tires for weight. We did that when I was a kid on the farm tractors. Thoughts?
Well, okay, so that is a cheater thing, okay? Yeah, water in the tires. But don't try and go over 15 miles an hour. Your vehicle will shake itself to death, okay? So again, if you're just crawling, and something else to consider is, remember how I talked about, not adding additional unsprung weight? Like with the tire balls, I mentioned that adds like, 13 to 15 pounds. Well, water's going to add like 50 pounds per tire. Okay, so that's a lot of unsprung weight. You're basically like doubling, what you've got, and that's going to seriously affect the suspension's performance unless you're just crawling. If you're going 4, 5, 6 miles an hour, it's not going to matter at all. So there you go.
Mark Lawrence asks, what are your thoughts about changing the 2-piece front axle to a 1-piece on a JL Rubicon? Heard there could be a vibration.
Okay, so I am always a fan of changing the 2-piece to a 1-piece. That started back with the YJ. And the reason they do it is because what it allows you as a driver to do is shift to high 4-wheel drive on the fly, okay? Because effectively what they're doing is disconnecting one side, allowing the vehicle to roll with less rolling resistance, improving your fuel economy, right? Remember, the manufacturers are held to a very high standard for the CAFE rating that was set way back by Obama. Like there's, those poor guys are having to deal with a bunch of junk that, as we build these Jeeps, we could care less about. So anytime you have multiple pieces that, something has to slide over and engage, you're asking for a failure point. Now, I can tell you this, the JL, unlike the YJ, it was terrible, okay? The JL, it's pretty good. They refined it quite well. And today, that kind of a feature is well used by Mercedes-Benz and several other car manufacturers. So, it's pretty well refined right now. Would I put that at the top of my list to change if it wasn't giving me any trouble? Probably not. There's plenty of other things that I would address first. I was thinking about this the other day. That's like a whole nother video I need to do, trying to guide people into where to spend their money first. We did it with our budget YJ build, but I really need to do one for like JK people and JL people, because they're the ones that are just getting completely misguided right now. And, if you listen to these parts manufacturers, they make it sound like you need all this stuff, including, light bars and stuff, which you absolutely do not. So, yeah, don't get me started.
Craig Huffman asks, what brand coilover do you recommend and why?
Okay, so I purposely spec King and Fox. Those are two brands that are very reliable, very well made, American made. They're raced, so they have a ton of support out there. We know the quality's high because in order to finish a 1,000-mile race, you can't have seals that are failing and other, issues with the shock. So both of those brands are very good. What I did was I took it a step further, and after we put those shocks on our vehicle builds, I take them and I shock tune them with the manufacturer till...
You're frozen.
I am? Till I feel like they're perfect.
Shoot.
How long's it been frozen?
Just turned. Is it because it's 6 o'clock maybe?
But does it cut us off?
I don't No.
Okay, well, let me finish what I'm saying in case they can still see us or hear us. I fine-tuned each king and fox for our suspension. So when you buy the shocks from us, they're going to come dialed for the GenRight suspension and a Jeep. Well, normally when you buy a shock, they don't know whether it's going on a truck, a buggy. They have no idea. So who knows what's inside?
Oh, they say they can hear.
Yeah, okay. So the camera, you didn't yank the camera battery when you were just messing
No,
with
the
it, right?
camera's working.
Okay.
It's YouTube. Picture's frozen.
These guys. Okay, well, it is 6 o'clock. So,
We had quite a few more
Did we?
questions. Yeah.
okay, well, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Tone period. Question about TJ platform. Is there an orientation for the rear coils? Does the cut end of the coil go one way or another?
So that depends on how your axle is set. Some axle mounts have a spot where the end of the coil will go into. Other people actually make like clamp kits to capture the spring, because those are known for, like the shock comes loose and the spring bounces out. So that's a good question, but typically it does not matter. If you notice on your vehicle that the spring is flexing one way, like out or in, or front or back, you can turn that coil and then affect the way that it flexes.
Daniel Partita, question. Almost have fully built Dana 44s on my JKU on 37s. Planning on finishing off with your stages for stock axles.
Nice.
Should I rather look into 1 tons, or do I have your blessing to keep building
Well,
these Dana 44s?
yeah, well, you're on the Dana 44s, you are good up to a 37-inch tire. Okay, so that's the key, because it's not just that they'll only hold up to a 37, because you can build them so that they might hold up more, but they're not wide enough. So you're going to get more articulation than a bigger tire can handle on that narrow axle. That's the real answer.
KS Durham says Tech Talk Polo and tees. Yellow?
Oh, okay, good. Yellow, no doubt. Okay.
Off-road overland camping says beadlocks. How important are they really? And can I buy rims and install the tire myself, or do I have to take them to a shop?
So there's plenty of videos that you can watch on YouTube about people installing tires on a beadlock wheel. It takes a little bit of cleverness, but it's really not that difficult. So yes, you can do it yourself. You need to not be in a rush, and there is a definite, I've done a whole video on how to mount a beadlock, so you can, on the GenRight YouTube channel, you can find how to properly do it. There's a way to do the bolt pattern on it, and the proper torque, and it takes going around several times on each one. So I love beadlocks. You wouldn't catch me running anything else on my Jeep, because you're able to go down so low on the tire pressure, and that pressure creates a giant footprint, which is traction. Okay?
Josh says, Callie says hi.
Hi, Callie.
Hi, Callie.
Nice.
Trail Team 7 says he wants a t-shirt. Troy Merritt says polo looks great. Wayne Kinchy says Tech Talk polo for me, or a tee, not a fashionista.
Nice. Did the screen unfreeze?
No, but you look pretty good.
Okay. Unbelievable.
Dark gray for t-shirts, Rick Turner says, like the blue for the polo, either or.
Okay. Good. Great feedback.
Adventures of Jeep Erratic says polo, just like that.
Wow, I didn't realize so many people wanted that.
Scott Zietler says, have you seen the new ARB brushless compressors?
I have, and they initially sold out of them. I am a big fan of the brushless. I happen to like that. Here's what I need to caution you about. I noticed in their marketing materials, they talked about how much faster it is. Well, within a compressor, what you don't realize is there's a little piston and connecting rod and crankshaft. Well, those, as you know, those little gearboxes are sealed right? So if you spin that thing too fast, eventually the lube's going to wear out and the thing's going to blow up. So as you also know, you don't have control of how fast that compressor's spinning. It's a set thing, and what they're doing is they're trying to create a performance spec that motivates people to buy their product. So right, it's like the iPhone 10 versus the iPhone 15, right? Like they're going to tell you how much faster it is, how much better, brighter, more capable. They're trying to sell the new product. I just want to caution you, if it's something you're using a lot and on a regular basis, then it may burn up on you. So just be heads up.
Stephen Draper asks, are there any negatives if your hub bore hole on wheel is larger than the actual hub? For example, the hole is 128 millimeters, but the hub is 125 millimeters.
Yes. So typically what you want is a hub-centric wheel, okay? There's always some like little lip on the hub, which would be, your rotor would go on, right? And then, you want something more than the lug nuts holding your wheel in place. By the way, this is why so many people go with 8-lug, because when you get an 8-lug, that's all that's holding it on there is the lugs, where our 5 lugs are hub-centric. So all the 5 lugs do is hold the tire on. The actual stress of a 40 or 42-inch tire is taken up by the hub.
Target Outdoors asked, why is double triangulated frowned upon for road use? 05 LJ, non-ruby, 5-speed manual, LS2, cast iron block, dynoed 335 foot-pound torque, 290 horsepower, currently stock axles. Want to run 37s, 38s, second vehicle.
Okay. So originally, everybody poo-pooed the double triangulation back when the YJ and the TJ were still at 93 inches. Okay, because a double triangulated rear suspension has no resistance. It moves totally free. That's when you talk about a GenRight suspension, we talk about it in terms of bind free. It's why we eliminate one of the front upper links, because all that stuff is fighting itself, which, by the way, adds stability to the road manners, okay? Well, we don't care about that. But what we want is off-road performance. Now, GenRight's figured out a way to still get the off-road performance and the road manners. So all of that said, the good news is you're starting with an LJ. That's a 103-inch wheelbase, 10 inches longer than what a TJ or YJ had. The longer the wheelbase you go, the better. So, for instance, your average JK or JL 4-doors are like 116, 118. And we run double triangulated on every single one of those. Every Elite EXS suspension is double triangulated because the wheelbase is so much longer. Body roll, the what you would experience on the shorter wheelbase is gone. And you still get all the performance that you want off-road and on-road. So great question. And, for a long time, a single triangulated, which we also offer in our Legend kit, was super popular for kind of what they called the dual sport on and off-road. But these days, every LJ we build here is 115 inches, and they're perfectly fine on a double triangulated. So hopefully that answers your question.
Let me try switching the intro and then back to the main to see if I can unfreeze.
Okay. It sounds like we still have more questions.
No, it's still frozen.
Okay. Well, we're a little bit over. Do you have more questions?
Just like a couple more.
Okay.
Snowboard Life. Hey, Tony, do you ever plan on putting a military discount on your Jeep parts or gear for the people that support our country?
Great question. We do offer a military discount. You just have to call in to get it. Okay, so just call in and talk to our guys.
Broken Parts says, selectable locker that works in a shaved 14 bolt that isn't ARB 40 spline.
I don't know if Yukon offers something. They might. They're big in the 14-volt stuff, so I would check with them. I don't know what Eaton has to offer. I could be talking out of turn, but there's a possibility Eaton's got something. I'm a big fan of the Detroit, so especially in the rear.
Michael Costin says, on Aftershock, what pressure do you run your tires at on the road? I set my Boss ATs at 28 in the back and 30 up front, and they're still off the outer edge.
Oh, gotcha. Well, so that what you're talking about has to do with the width of the rim, okay? So if you look on Mickey Thompson's website, they actually specify the rim width should be from this to this, and that keeps the tire wearing properly, right? If we're talking about me, typically if I'm kind of bopping between, like say I'm at Sand Hollow and I've got to run into town to get gas, I'll only go up to maybe 20 or 25 pounds because I'm only going 5 or 6 miles and back. If I'm going to take a 12-hour one-way road trip, I'm going up to 32 PSI. The difference between 25 PSI and like 32 is literally several miles per gallon in your fuel economy. So if that's a concern of yours, and you're looking for, just sheer, rolling efficiency, typically when I go on a trip like that, I'm fully loaded. So having more tire pressure with the full load is better. One of the things you need to remember, one of the things that kills a tire is heat. So when you have a heavy load and lower tire pressure, you're creating a ton of heat. So you really want to, like, I always check the heat in my tire with the back of my hand, and I closely monitor that, and that's something you should get used to. What else you got?
Rick Turner, do you make your own battery cables to extend it to your back seat, or do you buy it from a kit?
No, I actually make my own cables, and I am a fan of, when I build a cable like that, silver solder, not crimp. You need your best possible connection you can get. Okay?
Castrom, does the second battery power your auxiliary lights?
Okay, so that's a good question. So I run a Switch Pros, and the Switch Pros actually has a setting where you can have it cut off at a certain battery voltage. If you're worried about that, then yes, you can run your auxiliary lights and phone charging and a bunch of other stuff on that little auxiliary battery. The fridge doesn't take much to run once it's cooled off. To keep it cool is not much. So, that's a good way to think about it. If you're concerned about dipping that main battery too low, that's a great way to do it. Yes.
Bob Becker, what's for dinner?
Oh man, I have no idea.
It's grilled salmon.
Is that what it is?
Salad.
Oh yeah, that sounds great.
All kinds of good stuff.
I'm gonna barbecue that. Yeah, that sounds great.
Travis Dalton, do you run a spare tire on your rigs?
Okay, on Terramoto I do, because I'm trying to balance the weight front to rear, and I also drive it a lot faster, so my likelihood to blow it, run out of talent, and get a flat is high. On Aftershock, no, I absolutely don't run a spare. I carry a plug kit and a sewing kit. I have covered this on another Tech Talk, where if you get a big tear, you can sew it up with a boot repair kit, and then if you need to, fill it with tire plugs, and that'll get you back.
YouTube has a thumbs down on the freeze frame video.
Yeah,
Aww.
Sorry. That's I don't know what their problem. Like it is very, very challenging for us to do a live
apparently.
show.
Jeep TJ6 ARB locker in my D30. Do I need to change the carrier to go to 523 gears from 456, 513 maybe?
You're right on the cusp. So chances are 456, it's usually 456 and up, and then it would be like 411 and down. So you're probably on the right side of it to be able to keep that carrier.
JC Cologne wants a sleeveless polo. That would be so funny. Walker Stone asks, what about max tire size with stock 4.0 42 RLE 4-to-1 T case and a light TJ with JK Rubicon D44s, 38s, and RCV shafts?
Yeah, that's fine. You know, and again, that person is running an automatic transmission, right? So that also is easier on everything. And you know, if you're not driving like a rock bouncer or a monster truck driver, then you can keep that alive. But here's what I can tell you: the day that you have to tow one of your friends out, you are going to stress everything in your drivetrain. And one of the next few times you go out, it's going to break.
T Meadows says, Jennings rocks. We want to hear more Jennings. That must be my brother, Chase.
Nice.
Let's see. Matt McDonough. Yeah, Tech Talk may need to be 2 hours with everyone on YouTube. How about a trucker discount?
Hey, you know what? Call in and talk to my sales guys and work them for all you can get.
Question there on Cueva. How long are those lower links with double triangulated on 120 wheelbase?
I want to say they're like 34 inches. I would have to double check that, but off the top of my head, I think that's the length.
Okay, Mike Vondebag says, I'm finally able to start saving for my Jeep. I'm over 100,000 miles, so I know I need to start saving for a new engine.
Sure.
Any suggestions for a company that does aftermarket V6 ready for a SC?
Oh, man. I mean, if you're determined to stay with the V6, I would switch to a Chevy V6 myself. But, you know, that involves a bunch of wiring and other stuff. Otherwise, you just have to buy another factory V6 and throw, you know, low miles, get one out of a junkyard and throw it in there.
Joyo Boyo asks, if I want to add a portal axle from 74 weld, does it go well with stage 1 JK Elite?
Okay, so here's the problem with portal axles is however much offset the portal is, so say it's 4 inches, right? I can't remember what the 74 welds are, if they're 3 or 4 inches. What that's going to do is that's like adding a 3 or 4 inch lift to your vehicle. So you can't lower the ride height anymore. We just talked for the last hour about a 3-inch amount of shock shaft showing, right? So now you would effectively have a 6-inch shock shaft showing. So that means the vehicle is going to sit that much higher. Okay, so I would call that a monster truck. I personally would not do that. You've just, if you're doing our stage 1, you've just raised the belly 3 inches. You now have the same breakover as everybody with a 40-inch tire, and you're gaining what you need and keeping your center of gravity low. So I would, and by the way, those are not cheap. So I would reconsider that.
Let's see. Glenn B, 98 TJ LS swapped hardtop full doors, 2.5 by 14 Foxes, 175 over 250 coils,
Okay.
7-inch total shaft showing, bump set at 6-inch up travel. Change upper or lower first or both to get it lower?
Well, okay. So does that mean there's no preload on those springs? Does he have it just the nut just so they don't jingle on the shock? Because otherwise he could back off some preload and that'll lower the vehicle. If, say for instance, this hypothetically, there's no preload on that, then what he needs to do is drop the lower spring by 50 pounds and that will lower the ride height by 1 inch. Okay, so every 50 pounds equals 1 inch. And that doesn't matter whether it's the upper spring or the lower spring. Okay?
Okay, Ari Wheels, hi Ari,
Hey, Ari.
asked thoughts on upgrading to the American Iron Putter Knuckles.
Oh, actually, I've only seen those at a show. in theory, I like them. I think, he's trying to build a better mousetrap. But I personally haven't, had my hands on a set, and I haven't seen any out in the field. It's a pretty new product. So, hey, might be worth a shot, because I know Ari's talking about going to the ball joint deletes. That might just be a good way to do it, all in one shot. So, might not be bad.
Theron Cueva got a question. I have 12-inch coilovers 2.0 in the rear of my 2003 TJ with spring rate 300 over 400.
Whoa.
I hit bump stops a lot. What's the highest spring rate I should run to prevent that?
Okay, so before he does anything,
You can't see.
you can't see. You
Put
need
your
to
clothes
lower.
back on.
You need to lower those two nuts that are on the threaded shock shaft. Lower those down till they touch the plastic slider in between the two springs, and do the same thing, and let me know if you still bottom out.
Okay, that's all our questions.
Wow.
And it's 6:21.
Wow, we did great. All right, well, sorry about the glitch with YouTube. We're going to continue to work on that. And thank you, everybody. We will be back next Wednesday to answer more questions. And we sure appreciate everybody. Have a great rest of the week and weekend, and we'll see you next Wednesday.